Hi everybody, Martial Arts Guy here. I tell you, I can't wait for Daredevil Season 2. With Daredevil Season 2 comes the return of one of my favorite characters, Stick, Daredevil's martial arts master, played by none other than Scott Glenn. Now, you might know Scott Glenn from such films as Man on Fire, The Bourne Trilogy, Sucker Punch, and one of my personal favorites, Silverado. But did you know that Scott Glenn was in a martial arts movie? I only recently found out myself in the 1982 film The Challenge, starring Scott Glenn and Toshiro Mifune. Now, you might also know Toshiro Mifune from such films as The Seven Samurais, one of Japan's most revered samurai actors of all time. Now, this is an amazing thing, but fun fact, did you know that Toshiro Mifune was offered the part of Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, but was turned down because, they felt he was too intimidating? That is awesome. I mean, I would love to see what Karate Kid would have been like if they got none other than Crazy Eyes, as he was known by some of his fans, to play Mr. Miyagi. But another thing about this film is that the fight choreography was done by Steven Seagal himself. Yeah, that's Steven Seagal, the guy who squints all the time, is like, yeah, I'm Steven Seagal, I'm cool, I'll break your neck and then break your arm in one move. Yeah. But don't worry folks, this was when Seagal was good. Not like how he is now. I tell you folks, that's not fat you see, that's just his ego inflated to infinity. So with all that out of the way, let's start this film. We open in Japan in 1945, where an old samurai is presenting two swords to the new heir of the clan. He asks his grandson to present the swords to his eldest son, Yoshida, played by Toshiro Mifune. But Yoshida's younger brother Hideo wants the swords, and he believes them to be his, so he takes the swords, and in the process cripples his nephew. Okay, time out folks. Let me just say, I don't know why this scene should be here. I mean, later on in the film, we get the reason why a lot of this has happened, what's going on, and who's behind this. But this opening scene, from a storytelling standpoint, it doesn't make sense. You could cut out this scene and lose absolutely nothing. So, I don't understand. Why does it have to be here? Here, we have no idea what's going on, who these people are yet, or why this is important. Just saying. We flash over to the present, where we meet Rick, played by Scott Glenn, in a boxing match. But we see that Rick is no pushover when it comes to boxing.
How you like that, good thing?
Get off, Murphy! Come on, Murphy! Get out of the ring, Murphy!
Later, he is visited by Toshio and Akio Yoshida, who want his help in smuggling a katana into Japan. Geez, I'm right there with you guys. I know how hard it is to get a katana through customs. He agrees to this, and the next thing you know, he's in Japan, and he's already passed through customs. But before he can reach his destination, something goes wrong on the taxi ride. Meanwhile, Toshio and Akio are planning to meet at the rendezvous point. But the bad guys find out that Scott's sword is the decoy sword, and that the others must have the real sword. So they manage to catch up with Toshio and Akio in order to get the sword. Luckily, Akio manages to get away. Sadly for Rick and Toshio, they haven't escaped, and now they are being dealt with the main enforcer.
Believe me, I know how you feel. I come over here a couple times a year, and each time I understand less about these people. Let me give you an example. The two of you about to die over a sword. A freaking antique sword. Him I understand. They're queer for swords over here. They figure you mess with somebody's blade, you're messing with his soul.
Oh my god. Can it be? Is it even true? A Twinkie in a martial arts movie! What god did I appease to get that? But Toshiro refuses to tell where the real sword is, so the bad guys decide to get rid of him. Rick is then taken to Hideo's secret fortress in order to find out where the sword is. Hideo wants the sword no matter the cost, and is threatening Rick's life to get it. But Rick comes up with a reason why he doesn't know.
If you want a no-brainer decoy to bring a phony sword into the country, would you tell the asshole where the real article is? They're as smart as you. Your boy here's right, I'm dead meat.
I like that. It makes sense.
Even though Rick knows nothing, they're still going to kill him. Rick then assaults his captors and goes to escape. During the escape, Rick is mortally wounded. He manages to make it into an alleyway, but one of the goons catches up with him, and everything looks like it's over, until... Rick then finds himself at the Yoshida dojo, healing from his wounds. Rick then meets Master Yoshida, played by the great Toshiro Mifune himself, kicking ass as always. Rick wants to leave, but not until he gets the money he was promised. But I know what you're asking. Where is the sword? Well, funny thing is, it turns out the sword had been smuggled in Toshiro's wheelchair this whole time. Right under their noses. With the sword returned to him, Yoshida-sensei must now find a way to take the other sword from Hideo. Rick decides he's not leaving until he gets his money, so that means he's going to be joining them for dinner. Lobster sashimi. That stuff is good. The next morning, Rick tries to imitate the morning workout and gets an unexpected surprise.
You stink.
I stink. Listen to me. I'll kick your ass. I'll kick your ass. I'll kick any ass in this joint. All right?
You want to fight?
Yeah, shit, yeah, I'll fight.
Alright, now this scene I have a problem with. Okay, as a martial artist, I know every fighting style is different. You know, it depends on the person. But I have a hard time believing that a trained boxer could get his ass kicked this bad against someone who does Aikido. Now, I do not doubt Aikido is a good style. But it's kind of passive compared to, like, karate or judo or boxing. And, you know, this guy, he's not even fighting like a trained boxer. He's fighting like someone who's never been in a boxing ring, when we clearly see he is a skilled boxer. You know, I just don't get it. Of course, but then again, the fight was done by Seagal, so, you know, his ego probably was like, yeah, you know what? Aikido's awesome. And you know what? He can't fight like a real boxer. He's gotta, like, flail around and then get his ass kicked. Because, you know, that's how awesome Aikido is. I'm Steven Seagal, and I'm awesome. After the fight, they give Rick his money and send him on his way. That night, Rick decides to drown his sorrows in a local bar, but he receives an unexpected surprise. It turns out to be none other than the Twinkie, who has asked Rick to infiltrate the school in order to bring the katana to Hideo and make him rich in the process. Bring the sword to you, huh? You know, you seem like a completely trustworthy person who won't stab me in the back as soon as I give you the sword. Rick decides to take the Twinkie up on his offer and bring him the sword.
Why? I wasn't even in the same league. Please teach me, I'll do whatever you say.
よし、門下に書いてやれ。
He says he will accept you.
Alright, now, Rick is participating in something that's common in a lot of American martial arts movies. The white guy coming into the martial arts school or the village, or sort of like participating in the culture, learning their ways, in a way becoming one of them. And don't think this is just limited to the 80s. We still do this to this day. I'm looking at you, Marco Polo, on Netflix, which is awesome, and I can't wait for season 2. Rick's training starts off as about as well as you think. Rick even makes friends with a young boy named Jiro, who wants to learn the way of the sword and be a samurai. That night, Rick decides to take the sword and give it to Hideo. But Rick realizes that he can't go through with it, and he decides to take the sword back. All in all, I think this scene is very powerful. It really shows how Rick has changed. That, he went from a man looking out for himself to becoming some part of something bigger than himself. Doing the right and honorable thing, rather than the easy and greedy thing. And such is the making of a samurai. A few days later, Rick finds out that Hideo has challenged Yoshida to a duel, and Rick is to come as one of the witnesses. But Hideo has no interest in fighting this duel, and sends his men to take the sword from Yoshida. But Rick has a crazy plan to save his master, and it just might work. A few days later, Hideo's men try to steal the sword yet again. But Yoshida arrives in the nick of time to stop them from taking the sword. However, Jiro was injured in the fight. Rick decides that he's had enough of this and leaves. A few days later, Akio shows up at Rick's hotel and tries to convince him to come back because she loves him. But the next day, Hideo's men kidnap Akio and says that if they don't get the sword, they'll kill her. So Master Yoshida decides to meet his brother, to face him for the last time, and bring Akio back home. Okay, so Master Yoshida has got his sword and a bunch of bow and arrows to storm the palace to kill his evil brother and rescue his daughter. It's Toshiro Mifune. Of course he's that badass, he can do it. But Yoshida makes quick work of the guards and enters into the building. Even though Yoshida has killed many guards, he is becoming overwhelmed and outgunned until... Now that Rick has come to fight with Yoshida-sensei, they now have to go face Hideo. Eventually, they fight their way to the top, where Yoshida and Hideo finally have their duel to the death for the swords. Will someone kill him, please? Thank you. Hideo decides not to kill Yoshida because there would be no honor in it. So Rick decides to take his sensei's place. Now that's what I call a splitting headache. With Hideo dead and the swords returned, honor has now been restored to the Yoshida clan. So, that's the challenge. What did I think of it? I liked it. I think it's a good martial arts movie, and I highly recommend it. It's actually kind of funny watching this, because, sometimes I joke around with my friends and I tell them, oh, this is Stick's origin story. Because, like I said earlier, Scott Glenn plays Stick on the Daredevil TV show. If you're curious, check this movie out. You won't be disappointed. I'm the martial arts guy, and I gotta go to class.